Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our December 19th, 2022 special meeting to approve our legislative agenda. It is 9:07. Let the record reflect that all three commissioners are present and our executive management team. I am going to have us go around the room. We've got, we've got our executive management team, and then we have Representative Bowles in the office. We have Mike Burgess on Zoom, Senator Schessler on Zoom, Representative Dye on Zoom, Representative Graham, Representative Maycomber. And I think that's who we have now. There may be a couple more joining us. I think we told some of the legislators to join at 9:10. But we're thinking we're going to go ahead and go through the agenda, our legislative agenda in draft form. So that way, if there's any changes that need to be made, we can make those and then we'll approve it at the end. So Mike, I'm going to let you go ahead and start.
Okay. So just from a format standpoint, everyone, thank you. First of all, thanks for being here. I'm going to run through this relatively quickly. It's not new to the commissioners and to the legislators. There's not really any new issues on here, but for maybe one or two, and I'll highlight those. These are very similar items to what you've seen from us in the past, and that you've also seen, frankly, from other counties, and just broader issues that you've seen in Olympia. The first notation there, we always have just the general legislative operating budget, how the agenda is done in coordination with the county commissioners. Then getting to the actual points of it, the county fiscal health, this is the same verbiage that we've had for like 8 years, maybe 10, and just talks in general about the reliance that the county has on state shared revenues. Primarily, that ends up in the criminal justice area, through the court system. In the past 10 years, again, haven't been hugely concerned about this issue, just given the amount of revenue that the state has had and the growth in budgets. But I think we can all know that, there are signs of the economy showing with inflation, housing, and things like that. So we're going to want to keep an eye on, the potential for cuts to happen in this area. And again, it's primarily in the criminal justice area. A note there, the next line about the Blake decision, that is still an ongoing issue for the county dealing with Blake. That's the same narrative that we had from last year. Just acknowledging again that that is still an issue the county's dealing with and the legislature is still sorting through. On the growth management side, the narrative there is kind of a general statement. And then on the bottom, there are three issues in particular. There's on the condo development regulations. I know that is an issue that's been floating around Olympia the last handful of years. We're supportive of legislation to kind of streamline that process and make more affordable housing options available. On the riparian issue, you legislators in particular, you remember that bill was introduced early in session last year and met some pretty stiff opposition from different stakeholder groups. I do know that there is a new draft out that's floating around that I'm told is better, but the county, we haven't reviewed that or had a discussion about it, but certainly wanted to flag that as something that the county will have an interest in. And then the last item there on the Growth Management Act, the support legislation that Cheney and Medical Lake have some legislation they're drafting. I haven't seen it yet. I just know it's coming, allowing UGA swaps. So that's something that we conceptually that the commissioners have instructed that we will be supportive of. The next line there on the natural gas prohibition legislation, have a note there that this is a bit of a carryover from last year, that there had been talk of legislation about that, didn't come to fruition, but as you know, the Building Code Council has dealt with that issue. I do know that there'll be legislation trying to undo, I guess is the simplest way to say it, what has happened at the Building Code Council level. That is something the commissioners would be supportive of. Have concerns about the ability of folks in colder climates to heat, going purely electric. The next item, public building energy standards. This is in response to legislation that was passed. It was House Bill 1257. I can't remember if it was 4 or 5 years ago. But counties and public buildings are starting to have to respond to this. You're going to be hearing about it, I know, from some of your state buildings, and the cost to upgrade those buildings and comply with this. I've been told that Senator Mullet will have some legislation to look at this issue. But the drafts I've seen of that legislation are focused primarily on state buildings. But I'll assure you that every public building, city, county, in addition to folks in the private sector, are going to be having some problems complying with those requirements and the costs associated with that. So we're going to participate in those discussions. We have a couple staff members at the county in particular that are very well versed on this, that I've offered up on the Senate side to Senator Mullet to be a part of a work session if that ends up happening. Also, when we get to the capital budget request, you'll notice that we have an item there on the public health building to respond to that. The next item is the vehicular pursuit. We support the efforts to modify that statute in response to legislation that was passed a couple of years ago. I don't think that's a new issue to anybody, but just on record that the commissioners support that and join the Police and Sheriff's Association in trying to solve that problem. Going to the next page, we have 3 items that are on WASAC, the Association of Counties' broader legislative agenda that we support. Sorry, yeah, there you go. Jump back that page. Thank you. The first is a federal transportation fund exchange program. I'm not super well versed in this, but what I do know is that it's a way to kind of streamline some of the paperwork that is done through DOT and through the counties, and it will make it so the counties and the state itself can realize a lot more federal funding for transportation projects. The next one is in the behavioral health arena. It's actually similar to the above item on the transportation side, that the new network adequacy standards be developed and are in place before the healthcare authority enters into their procurement process to select Medicaid eligible managed care organizations. It's our belief that that's, again, a more streamlined way to do it, in a more effective way for funds, and then ultimately services to flow to the constituents. Then the last item on the WASAC legislative agenda is the county jail costs. WASAC will be having discussions with the legislature this year about exploring opportunities to partner with the state on county jail construction. I know the commissioners have been dealing with that issue over the years. And it's a wide-ranging issue from all counties. In some ways, it depends. When you hear about it on the legislative side, it depends which counties are where in terms of the need for their new jail. But certainly Spokane is a part of that discussion. Switching to the capital budget requests, we have 5 listed there. The minor league baseball stadium fund that you're aware of, and the county-owned facility. We support the endeavor to find some funds to upgrade and make repairs to stadiums across the state, and in particular, obviously, the Spokane facility. The Spokane Fairgrounds has a roof replacement issue, $1.5 million there. A third item, the continue the state support for the Fairchild Air Force Base, the mobile home mitigation. That's something that's been ongoing over the last 8 to 10 years. There was a line item in the budget last year. We were pleased to see that and hope to see more of that kind of thing. Shrek has a $3 million request for building construction on their end. And then that last item is the Spokane Regional Health District. And you'll see the narrative there. And legislators, we'll share this once it's, obviously we'll email this out to you all once this is adopted. But that talks about some of the costs associated with complying with that green energy requirement. So we have a request in to help with that. And then lastly, there are a list of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 transportation projects. Understand, where we're probably going to be in terms of transportation budget requests, but we always want to have a list of projects available to you all in case something does end up happening on that. But again, realize that with the passage of a revenue package last year, understand how realistic or not maybe realistic it is that something happens in that this year. But if money is freed up, there are projects in the Spokane region that are in the pipeline that need to be accomplished. So I went through that quickly. There's obviously a lot there, but like I said, I don't think a lot of it's brand new information to you folks. And then Commissioner CUNY, I can stop now and be happy to answer any questions that I can. And I guess I can leave it at that for now.
Very good. Thank you very much. So I see we've been joined by Representative Riccelli, Representative Ormsby, and Representative-elect Schmidt. So thank you all for joining us. I'm not sure at what point you joined. So Mr. Burgess was just going through our legislative agenda. It is still in draft form. We have not officially adopted it. We will at the end of the meeting. Just thinking that if there was any questions or comments beforehand, we could incorporate those. So I'll check with my fellow commissioners to see if they have any questions or comments first. Nope. I appreciate, Mike, you and I know Jeff McMorris have worked very hard to help get this agenda put together for us, and so we really appreciate that. So based on that presentation, I don't know if there's any questions or comments from our representatives and senators that have joined us today. I'm not seeing any. I guess I'll also open it up if there's any topics, from our representatives, that you'd like to discuss that you guys are going to be looking to in session as well. No, everybody's
talking to group.
I know, no one wants to talk. I see.
We're ready for Christmas.
I see, Representative Maycomer just got her video off, and she is ready for Christmas. I love it.
Hey, Mary, I have one comment that I had a conversation last week or the week before with the state treasurer's office, and it looks like they're going to be doing some administrative changes to the TIF bill, the TIF laws. So if there's any interest for administrative cleanup or any changes you'd like to see, I told them that I would be working with them on helping them get it. It sounds like it's mostly a technical corrections bill that they're looking at. But so if there's anything of interest that might be, the board might want to pursue, and I sent kind of a heads up to Jeff earlier. So it's somewhere in the hopper if there's changes that need to be made from your perspective.
No, I think that would be great because I think, we've been doing TIFs, Spokane County has for quite a while.
Yes.
And
we well know in the treasurer's office.
So I know, with our civil office, and Mr. Amacia, who's still volunteering his time, has been part of that for a very long time. So yeah, I would think he might have some thoughts and ideas as well as, any of the commissioners here. So thank you. Mr. French?
Well, I was just going to provide a little bit of a background, if you don't mind, on a couple items. One, the condo development regulations. The biggest obstacle there is a liability issue and both the length and the dollar amount associated with liability. And then my suspicion is that in addition to dealing with that, the Supreme Court also ruled a couple weeks ago that the 1-year warranty provision for construction contractors violates the statute of limitations provisions and stuff. So there'll probably be some work around that issue as well to try and not only align but also get our liability issues in place. The real estate industry is telling us that people are paying more in rent for apartments than they would be paying on a mortgage if they could buy that same unit as a condo. And the nice thing about a condo provision is that you do not have to worry about rent increases. So it's one of those issues that is going to be supported. It's a priority with cities. The Association of Washington Cities has also got it as a top priority, and Betsy Wilkerson, that's the incoming chair for AWC, and I have pledged to work together to try and find a path forward on condo development regulations. So I think this is one of those issues that crosses party lines. With regard to the heat pumps, I do sit on the State Building Code Council, and unfortunately I'm in the minority there, but this issue with regard to public buildings, there was an independent study done on Western Washington University to convert it from steam plant system that's driven by natural gas over to all electric. That study is out now, but it showed that conversion of that one university campus was going to be over $600 million. That's six with a lot of zeros behind it and stuff. So that'll just give you an idea of the ripple effect that this provision will have across the state. And of course, Spokane County, our campus is also driven by steam heat for the majority of our older buildings and stuff. And so that's where that is driven. The other part of this is that heat pumps, which is what the Building Code Council is trying to push everybody to, do not work below 20 degrees. And of course, 20 degrees right now would be heat wave. We're supposed to be in single digits this week. So the challenge is that the Building Code Council homogenized the regulations to fit the I-5 corridor and basically ignored Eastern Washington. And the change in climate, even though you have a House bill that allows the Building Code Council to have two separate standards, one for the west side, one for the east side, and specifically calls out eastern counties as part of that different climate change. The Building Code Council chose to ignore that and homogenize the requirements and stuff. So just a little bit of background on those two issues that might help as part of the conversation as you move forward. Thank you.
Legislators, I'd just like to add on the green building issue, and I think I mentioned this before, but make sure, I just wanted to be clear that the legislation I talked about, that I've heard the request, obviously there's a difference between state-owned buildings and county or city-owned buildings. And so we want to make sure that the county is a part of those discussions on the mitigating that green building cost, not just the state-owned buildings. Just throwing that out there again.
Right, and that's part of why we have the request in for the health district building as well, because the health district owns that building, but they're still subject to all those same standards. So that's why, the request, because they don't have the funds that just appear to make that happen.
And I'm certain we will not be the only ones you hear from about this.
So, and then I would clarify on the WASAC agenda, the Federal Transportation Fund Exchange Program is trying to exchange, so state, how do I say this? Swap federal aid highway funds for state transportation funds. And what that does is it allows counties that have a smaller department to not have to do all the federal additional federal requirements, to just keep it to what the state requirements and the local requirements are. So if we can do that kind of exchange for those funds, then the bigger projects that will be subject to all the federal guidelines and standards allows that to then swap some of those state funds with those federal dollars to keep those funds in a manner that is easier for some of these smaller counties on smaller projects. I know, any other questions or thoughts that people have?
I'll throw out another comment here.
Sure.
So on page 2, continued state support for Fairchild Air Force Base mobile home mitigation. The state has been very gracious in partnering with the county in terms of trying to protect Fairchild Air Force Base. And you did provide some funding to provide replacement housing. And that replacement housing is now complete and ready to receive the residents from the mobile home parks. And so we are now in negotiations actively with some of the mobile home park owners to get them to close their park and transition the folks that live in those substandard housing into the housing provided by the partners is Habitat for Humanity and workforce. What's that? Community Frameworks, thank you, and developer Jim Frank, who's provided low-income housing as well as the services to move folks into the new housing. But now we need to step in with the second phase of this and acquire the mobile home park. So that's part of that ongoing effort.
And then I'll say one more item too, with the county jail costs, with the new sentencing guideline commission that is going to be having new guidelines come out, I would just want to make you aware that 364 days and less people stay in the county jails 365 days or more, they go into the state penitentiaries. And so as we look at those guidelines, we're hearing that there could be more of a push to keep people in the county jails, which is then more funding that is required of counties. So as we look at those, some of those sentencing guideline shifts, it's also the funding that goes along with that. So I just want to make sure that representatives are all aware of that. Representative Riccelli.
Hi, thanks for having us here and sharing early. It's really helpful to kind of get an outlook headed into session. Particularly appreciate the opportunity to hear about some of the capital requests. Just because I know at times we've kind of come across them at a later stage, so it's super helpful to hear about them early. Actually, this could go offline, but there's going to be a lot of focus on workforce, and I didn't know. We've touted and we all work together and everybody put in effort into the diversion facility. And I'd love an update offline. What I've heard anecdotally is that some of the reasons it's maybe not operating full speed is just because of the workforce issues. And so as we look at some of those, I'd love to be more in tune with how we could be fully operating that, any challenges with workforce, et cetera, on the behavioral health side.
Yeah, no, we'd love to give you an update on that. Mike Sparber, our criminal justice director, is here, and so we will get that for you. I think they initially had a workforce shortage. I think they're fully staffed.
Yeah, turn the corner.
So they have turned the corner on that.
A little bit, yeah, they're not quite up to speed, but they're getting close. I'd be happy to get those for you, just so you could take a look at them, so.
Appreciate that, thanks.
Yeah, no worries.
And it's definitely been a great program. I just heard of somebody else recently. I was sent a link to, but they're really tracking that, and so they did a video from somebody from the city side that talks about the success that we're having there. The people really are getting help, that are getting diverted from our jail to that system, and so we're seeing. From what I know, with it being almost fully staffed, that it's been full. I know there's been certainly people from Camp Hope that have gone there as well to get help and stabilized. So, I mean, it's really been an asset to our community.
Representative, you raise a good point too about the mental health. I mean, I'm kind of making the leap, but obviously with the governor's budget last week in his proposal for significant investments in mental health, homelessness, and those types of things. Obviously, that stuff has to trickle down to the county level at some point. And so once we get a look, and we'll probably do this in conjunction with the Association of Counties, once we get a look at what the legislation looks like specifically and kind of how those things all fit together, we'll give you the feedback on that. Just not the exact same issue, but piggybacking on what you brought up.
Yeah, and we just had our meeting with our regional behavioral health organization with our 6 counties and talked about the needs. Frontier Behavioral Health was one of the ones really talking about that a clinician, a master level clinician is only making like $60,000 a year at like a Frontier Behavioral Health or out in other community organizations. But they can go work for a private organization, they're making $90,000 a year. And so that's why we're seeing this big jump where people are going to these private organizations and are not staying with the counties or other behavioral health, like the health district or the hospital districts. And so with that, I know right now on our behavioral health teams, co-deployed police officer teams and the sheriff's office teams, we have 8. We only have 1 of those that are filled through Frontier Behavioral Health right now because we just can't get people to come and work for the salaries that are being offered. So that I think you're going to see that as a big discussion for workforce for the mental health side. Hey, any other comments or questions? No, well, we are always here to answer any question. Oh, Representative Maycumber, I see you raise your hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch base on one of my policies that the Sheriff's Department was looking at, and that would be the regional police academy training commissions. And I know that the governor and the other caucus was promoting it this summer. around August, and that bill will be coming back. So it's something to discuss on how it would look in the broad range of what you guys want to see done. And that is also comparative with what the governor had mentioned. So I don't know if it's going to be spearheaded by a D, but I'm going to go ahead and bring back the policy that we had spent many years discussing regarding that issue.
Representative, I had a conversation with the folks at the the Criminal Justice
CJTC.
Training. Yeah, okay. About that issue and follow up, and kind of because there was some press, that popped up back in July about that. And I got the sense that they're looking at a Tri-Cities location for whatever that's worth. So throwing that out, but yes, I would love to follow up with you about this and figure out, because I know Spokane has some facility availability and needs as well.
Well, and I would just comment on that too, that as the state requirements went to 10 weeks, as we get new officers and new corrections officers, to go through that training, to, have them leave their families and have to go to the west side is part of our workforce issue. Because a lot of those people don't want to then, get hired, have to go to training that they're going to be gone for 10 weeks. They can come back on the weekends, but that's still not what those families have signed up for. And so the more that we can do to make sure that it's local for people, I think we're going to see that help our workforce.
And I'd also comment too, there's only 4 academies for corrections a year. And all the jails are vying for spots to get their people into those academies. So if they could increase the amount of academies they held, that would also, they offer numerous for the law enforcement, but only 4 per year for that staff. So.
Well, I'm glad that the governor and everybody seems to be in agreement. It's a brilliant idea. Always love that when it's a policy you've worked on for years.
Go ahead.
Can I ask, are there any other priority policies that any of the other legislators are going to be introducing this year, whether they be new or ones you're bringing back for another shot?
Mary's got her hand up. There you go. Hey, I see Mary Dye, Representative Dye, if you'd like to go.
Sure. I think that on the natural gas ban issue, there's 2 parts to that. And one is, you're not the first group that has said anything regarding the need to invest in new HVAC. That may not be the best choice for our winter region. Forecast for later this week is it's going to drop into single digits. And that's when heat pumps become extremely inefficient, and there's other technologies that can scrub the carbon out of a petroleum-based fuel system. So, to me, I think that we need to really ask specifically to be technology neutral on how we decarbonize the fuel systems for our heat and HVAC in Eastern Washington, in particular in the northern parts of our state. But even in Pomeroy, it's going to get really cold, and we live pretty high up in elevation, so we experience more cold. So I get frustrated that the legislature law takes a long time to create, and technology has oftentimes passed by the policy before the policy gets enacted, and then it has negative impacts. The second thing on that is that I don't think anybody in the state really added up how much of an impact this will have on our public buildings and the impact that that's going to cost all of our counties, cities, school districts, other public entities across the state, many of whom are funded by local resources. So I think that you need to emphasize that aspect as well, the catastrophic impact that is going to drive funds to something that doesn't need replaced or repaired at the current time, and that there are add-on technologies that can currently scrub carbon out of the fuel before it goes into the furnace. So to me, I just feel like we really created a burden on our local communities in a way that is unfair. And finally, the Building Code Council itself doesn't have the authority to legislate new policy at this scope. And so those are some of the aspects that concern me about it. And as for our dear friends, Honorable Rep. Ormsby and appropriations, I'm sure that although capital budget is going to take the larger hit, you know, these are going to have significant impacts on the cost of operating these buildings after the fact, because the switch to an inefficient heat pump, once the temperatures drop below 20, it becomes very much more expensive to operate those buildings. And I just hope that, you know, we start to put some numbers, real hard numbers, to the impact to your jurisdiction. That's all.
Thank you, Representative Dye. Representative Maycomer, your hand is raised.
Yes, I was just going to mention, I also brought back the pre-apprenticeship program in high schools policy, and it has been co-sponsored by both Republican and Democrat leadership. And that would affect Spokane. I know we have our skill centers and our trade centers, and that was for more rural districts to make sure we get that training back in the schools. And so I look forward to that bill. I also have the Pursuit bill, which will look towards making it criminalization to pursue in certain cases, especially when the safety of others is involved. And then also bring back funding for auto theft when it comes to that bucket of money that was swept. But I lean it over to Tim Ormsby, and he will be reading it before I drop it, since he is the expert in that policy. And so those were my 4 policies that I will be bringing forth that greatly affect Spokane County.
Very good. Thank you very much. Representative Riccelli.
Yeah, I'm excited to be bringing forward a bill. We've made pretty good movement on feeding kids through the pandemic. We saw that a lot of kids relied on school meals, and we had universal meals because they were funded by the feds. That ended last year. We've voted for some policies to expand that. And so we have about 700,000 plus of our kids, our 1.1 students, that are getting universal meals. And so I'll be introducing legislation to close the gap there and move that to all 1.1. It does have a price tag, but we saw that hunger was significant, childhood hunger was significantly reduced. And I think this is also good for making movements, because first we get all kids meals, then we figure out how to locally source them. We can help our growers, we can make them healthier, etc. So thanks, Senator Schessler. Apparently you don't care for that one. Go ahead. If you want to expand upon that, happy to hear more.
Well, if you want to pay people that are making 6 figures a free lunch, go ahead. Administrators, senior educators, go ahead.
Well, I appreciate the blunt conversation.
Thank you. Anyone else have any other policy areas that they're going to be focusing on?
Well, I'll just say, I just received committee assignments on Friday, so I haven't had a whole lot of time to think about, other than I would say that, and I've been taking notes about, so I have been assigned to the post-secondary and workforce development committee. So looking at the behavioral health needs and what can we do in the workforce to work on that, to get people educated and licensed in the state. So I'll be looking at that. And in fact, I want to follow up on that with you, Mary, when you talked about the committee with behavioral health, I'd like to follow up on that. I'm also going to be working on labor and workplace standards, which as Representative Riccelli said, that's going to be a big issue moving forward in this session. And then I'm on transportation. So I was happy to bring home another seat on the transportation committee to the east side of the state.
Very good. Okay, so I'm not seeing anyone else raise their hand or here or on Zoom. I just want to say thank you so very much for joining us. I know we kind of put this together in the middle of last week. So we really appreciate you taking the time to be with us and to hear what the needs are that we have here in Spokane County. And wish you all just a great holiday and good luck in the new session. We look forward to seeing you when we come over in the end of January with our GSI fly-in. So we're excited to be able to do that in person this year and look forward to seeing you. And so please know to reach out to us anytime if you have questions or concerns, because we would love to help answer those questions or concerns that you might have. Mike, I'm going to see, Burgess, if there's any last comments that you have.
Nope, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all very much. Then we're going to just go ahead. If there's no other changes to our legislative agenda, we are going to be adopting it so we can let the rest of you go, because I will open it up for public testimony here in a minute. Just thank you very much for your time. We really appreciate it, and happy holidays.
Commissioner, I guess I'll hang for a minute until you approve it and then I'll drop off.
Okay, sounds great. Okay, with that, any changes anyone wants to make to our legislative agenda? Commissioners, no? Okay, so then do I need to have the motion first before I open it up for public comment, or open up?
Either's fine.
Madam Chair, I would move that we adopt the Spokane County Legislative Agenda for 2023 as presented this morning.
I will second the motion.
Okay, I have a motion and second to adopt the Spokane County Legislative Agenda for 2023. Seeing no other comments from the commissioners, I will open it up for public comment as we'll be taking action on this today. First call for anyone wishing to testify on the legislative agenda. Anyone online? I think it's *9 if you're on the phone, or raise your hand if you're on Zoom. Second call for anyone wishing to comment. Third and final call for anyone wishing to comment. Seeing no one on Zoom or no one in our room, I will close the public comment and call for the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Mike, very much for all your help and all your effort. Jeff McMorris, I don't know if he's left the room, but appreciate all of his effort.
Thank you all. Have a nice holiday.
Okay, you too.
Bye.
So
If I could ask, could we make sure this gets sent to kind of all our regional partners? I know just most of the committees that I serve on that also have a ledge agenda have asked once all the jurisdictions pass, they'd like copies. So if we could just kind of send it as widely as we can to our other regional partners, I think that would be a benefit.
I don't see a line for our signatures. Do we want to make sure our signatures are on the bottom?
I think so.
I think so too.
Yeah, I think
Even if it's
powerful.
small, just to keep it, so I don't want them to flip, but to make sure that all three signatures, and if need be, we can everyone use our stamps if we're not in the office. Okay. Then with that, we've got our legislative agenda done. So, hi, Diana. Sorry. So with that, then we do have a few executive session items.
We do. We've got two pending and potential litigation items to discuss with the three commissioners, our executive management team, Mark McLean and Dale Anderson. The first one will be 10 minutes. The second one will be 10 minutes. No action is anticipated for either. The third item is to discuss labor negotiations that will, with the commissioners, the executive management team, Mark McLean, and also Josh Grote. And that will be 10 minutes and no action anticipated. So total of 30 minutes.
Okay, so we have a total of 30 minutes that will be going into executive session for those three items just discussed. So it is 9:46. And we'll go into executive sessions for 30 minutes, and we will be adjourning at the end of the 30 minutes. And happy holidays to everybody that's online. Thank you.